The man sat quietly on the cold concrete, his back pressed against the brick wall of a building that glowed with warm light from inside. His coat was torn at the sleeves, his fingers blackened with dirt, but his hands still moved with the kind of precision that came from years of practice. The kind of precision surgeons never lose, even when everything else falls apart. Inside the restaurant, people laughed. Glasses clinked. A woman in a silk dress raised a champagne flute. A child played with a breadstick, flicking crumbs across a white tablecloth. No one looked outside. No one saw the man who had once saved lives in rooms just like this one, sterile, controlled, under bright lights where every second mattered. Then a scream shattered the evening. "Help! Someone help! My daughter can't breathe." The homeless man stood up. Everyone inside froze, because no one understood what he was about to do. Not yet. But before we dive into this story, hit that like button and subscribe. And drop a comment. Where are you watching from, and how old are you? His name was Dr. Marcus Gray. Or at least, it used to be. 15 years ago, Marcus had been the head of cardiothoracic surgery at St. Catherine's Hospital, one of the most prestigious medical centers in the country. He performed over 300 heart surgeries a year. He saved children born with defective valves. He saved fathers who collapsed at their daughters' weddings. He saved mothers who thought they'd never live to see their babies grow up. He was exceptional at what he did, and he knew it. But 15 years ago, everything changed. Inside the restaurant, a man in his 50s sat at a corner table near the floor-to-ceiling windows. His name was David Morrison, CEO of Healthbridge Corporation, a massive healthcare company that owned 12 hospitals across 3 states. He was eating a perfectly cooked steak, medium rare, paired with a bottle of Bordeaux that cost more than most people earned in a week. Across from him sat his daughter, Emily, 17 years old, scrolling through her phone and laughing at something only she could see. David didn't notice the homeless man outside. He never noticed people like that. People who didn't contribute. People who didn't matter. What David didn't know was that the man sitting on that cold sidewalk had once stood in front of him in a boardroom, arguing for a patient's life. It had been 15 years ago. Marcus had been called into an emergency meeting with Healthbridge executives. They wanted to cut funding for the cardiac ICU. Too expensive, they said. Not profitable enough. David Morrison had been the one leading the presentation, clicking through slides filled with numbers and projections and cost-benefit analyses. Marcus had listened for 20 minutes before he couldn't stay quiet anymore. "These aren't numbers," Marcus had said, his voice cutting through the polite corporate speak. "These are people. Children. Mothers. Fathers. You're talking about cutting the only program in this region that can save them." David had smiled. Not warmly. Just the kind of smile people give when they're about to say something they've rehearsed. "Dr. Gray, we understand your passion. But passion doesn't pay the bills. This hospital operates at a loss. If we don't make changes, we'll have to close entirely. Then no one gets saved." "There are other ways to cut costs," Marcus had argued. "Administrative bloat. Executive salaries. You don't have to kill people to balance a budget." The room had gone silent. David's smile had disappeared. "I think we're done here," he'd said. And 3 weeks later, Marcus received a letter. His position was being eliminated. Budget cuts. Nothing personal. Marcus had tried to find work at other hospitals. But Healthbridge had influence. Word spread quickly. He was difficult, uncooperative, a liability. No one would hire him. His savings ran out. His wife left, taking their son with her. She couldn't handle the uncertainty, the shame of being married to a man who'd thrown away everything for a principle. Marcus didn't blame her. Maybe he should have kept his mouth shut. Maybe he should have been smarter. But he couldn't, because every time he closed his eyes, he saw the faces of the patients who would die because the ICU shut down 6 months after he was fired. 17 people in the first year alone. He knew because he'd kept track. He read every obituary, attended 2 of the funerals. Standing in the back where no one would recognize him, he stopped sleeping, started drinking, lost his apartment. And eventually he ended up here on this sidewalk, outside a restaurant where people paid more for one meal than he'd seen in a month. Inside the restaurant, Emily Morrison pushed her plate away. "I'm full," she said. David glanced at her barely touched steak. "You ordered it. You should finish it." "I'm not hungry anymore." David sighed. He'd been trying to connect with his daughter for months now, ever since her mother died 2 years ago. Cancer. Fast and brutal. Emily had been 15 when it happened, and she'd shut down emotionally ever since. Therapy hadn't helped. Nothing helped. She just went through the motions. School, homework, dinner with Dad, repeat. "You want dessert?" David asked, trying to sound casual. "No." "Coffee?" "Dad, I'm fine. Can we just—" Emily stopped mid-sentence. Her hand went to her throat. Her eyes went wide. "Emily." David leaned forward. "What's wrong?" She tried to speak, but no sound came out. Her face started turning red. She stood up, knocking her chair backward, her hands clawing at her neck. David jumped to his feet. "Emily! Emily, what's happening?" She couldn't answer. She was choking. Her lips were turning blue. "Someone help!" David screamed. "My daughter can't breathe." The restaurant erupted into chaos. People stood up. A waiter ran toward the kitchen. Someone shouted about calling 911. But no one knew what to do. No one moved toward Emily, who was now on her knees, her face darkening, her movements becoming weaker. David dropped beside her, his hands shaking, his mind blank with terror. He didn't know CPR. He didn't know anything. He was a businessman. He made decisions about budgets and acquisitions and stock prices. He didn't know how to save a life. "Move." The voice came from behind him. "Quiet. Steady." David turned and saw the homeless man standing in the doorway. His coat was filthy. His beard was matted. He smelled like the street. "Get away from us," David said instinctively. "Someone call security. Your daughter has about 90 seconds before brain damage starts," the man said, stepping closer. "You want to waste time, or you want me to help her?" David stared at him. Emily's movements were getting weaker. Her eyes were starting to roll back. "Do it," David whispered. Marcus moved fast. He dropped to his knees beside Emily, positioned himself behind her, and wrapped his arms around her torso. His hands locked together just below her rib cage. Then he pulled. Sharp. Upward. Once. Twice. 3 times that on the 4th compression, something dislodged. A piece of steak flew out of Emily's mouth and skittered across the polished floor. She gasped. Air rushed into her lungs. She coughed violently, her body shaking, tears streaming down her face. But she was breathing. Marcus sat back, his hands still steady, his breathing controlled. He'd done this 1,000 times. Well, not the Heimlich specifically, but the calm under pressure, the precision, the certainty that comes from years of training. Emily collapsed forward, sobbing, gulping air. David wrapped his arms around her, holding her so tightly it hurt. "You're okay," he kept saying. "You're okay. You're okay." The restaurant was silent. Everyone stared at the homeless man kneeling on the floor, but a waiter approached cautiously. "Sir, are you a doctor?" Marcus stood up slowly. He didn't answer. He just turned toward the door. "Wait." David's voice stopped him. David stood up, still holding Emily's shoulder. He looked at the man who'd just saved his daughter's life. Really looked at him. And something in the man's eyes, something tired and familiar, made David's stomach drop. "Do I know you?" David asked. Marcus met his gaze. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "No," Marcus said finally. "You don't." He turned and walked toward the door. "Wait." David stepped forward. "At least let me pay you. Thank you. Something." Marcus stopped but didn't turn around. "I don't want your money." "Then what do you want?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he looked back over his shoulder. "I wanted you to remember that people aren't numbers on a spreadsheet. But I don't think you ever will." He walked out. David stood frozen. Emily was leaning against him, still coughing, still crying. People were talking around him, asking if she was okay, if they should still call an ambulance. But David wasn't listening. He was staring at the empty doorway, his mind racing that voice. Those hands. The way the man moved with absolute confidence. The way he'd looked at David like he knew him. "Dad!" Emily's voice pulled him back. "Who was that?" "I don't know," David said. But that was a lie. He did know. Or at least, he was starting to remember. 2 hours later, David sat in his office at Healthbridge headquarters. Emily was home, resting. The paramedics had checked her out and said she was fine. Just shaken. David had told her to take the next day off school. She'd hugged him, actually hugged him, for the first time in months before going to her room. David should have felt relieved. His daughter was alive. But all he could think about was the homeless man. The more he replayed the moment in his mind, the more certain he became. He opened his laptop and pulled up the company's old employee files. It took him 20 minutes of searching before he found it. A personnel file from 15 years ago. Dr. Marcus Gray, head of cardiothoracic surgery. Terminated. There was a photo attached. Marcus in a white coat, clean-shaven, younger, smiling slightly. David compared it to the face he'd seen tonight. Older, tired, broken, but the same eyes. The same sharp, intelligent eyes. David sat back in his chair. His hands were shaking. Marcus Gray. The doctor who'd argued with him in that boardroom. The doctor who'd called him out for cutting the cardiac ICU. The doctor David had made sure would never work in medicine again. And tonight, that same doctor had saved his daughter's life. David closed his laptop. He sat in the dark office for a long time, staring at nothing. The next morning, David drove back to the restaurant. It was early, barely past dawn. The streets were empty. He parked and walked to the spot where Marcus had been sitting the night before. He wasn't there. David checked the alley behind the building. Nothing. He walked 2 blocks in each direction, scanning doorways and benches and overpasses. But Marcus was gone. David spent the next 3 days searching. He hired a private investigator. He visited every shelter in the city. He talked to outreach workers and volunteers. But no one had seen a man matching Marcus's description. It was like he'd disappeared. On the 4th day, David received a call from St. Catherine's Hospital. One of the nurses had heard about what happened at the restaurant. She'd worked with Marcus 15 years ago. She told David that Marcus sometimes slept near the old hospital, under a bridge about a mile away. David drove there immediately. He found Marcus sitting against a concrete pillar, reading a water-damaged paperback novel. "Dr. Gray," David said. Marcus looked up. His expression didn't change. "You shouldn't be here. I need to talk to you." "No, you don't." David sat down anyway, a few feet away. Marcus watched him but didn't leave. "My daughter is alive because of you," David said. Marcus shrugged. "Anyone with basic first aid training could have done what I did. But they didn't. You did." David paused. "I remember you. From the hospital. From the meeting. Good for you. I'm sorry." Marcus laughed. It was a bitter, hollow sound. "You're sorry." "I am. I didn't understand what I was doing back then. I was just trying to save the company." "You were trying to save money," Marcus corrected. "There's a difference." David looked down at his hands. "I know that now." "Do you?" Marcus closed his book. "Do you know how many people died because you shut down that ICU? 17 in the first year. 23 the second year. I kept count." David felt something twist in his chest. "I didn't know." "You didn't want to know. It's easier that way." They sat in silence. A car drove past on the street above them, tires humming on wet asphalt. "Let me help you," David said finally. "I can get you a place to stay. Get you back on your feet. Maybe even help you get your medical license reinstated." Marcus shook his head. "I don't want your help." "Why not?" "Because it doesn't change anything. You'll go back to your office and make the same decisions you always make. You'll cut more programs, fire more people, ruin more lives. And you'll sleep just fine because the numbers will look good. That's not fair." Marcus looked at him. "Fair? You want to talk about fair?" David didn't have an answer. Marcus stood up. He picked up his backpack and slung it over his shoulder. "Your daughter is a good kid. I'm glad she's okay. But that doesn't mean we're even. It doesn't mean anything is fixed." He started to walk away. "Wait," David said. "Please. Just tell me what I can do." Marcus stopped. He turned back. "You really want to know?" "Yes. Reinstate the cardiac ICU. Fund it properly. Hire good people and pay them what they're worth. Stop treating patients like profit margins." Marcus paused. "And stop pretending you can't afford it. I've seen your financial reports. You can. You just don't want to." David opened his mouth to argue. But he couldn't. Because Marcus was right. "I'll think about it," David said. Marcus smiled sadly. "No, you won't." He walked away. This time David didn't follow. But 3 weeks later, David called an emergency board meeting. He presented a proposal to reinstate the cardiac ICU at St. Catherine's Hospital. The board resisted. The numbers didn't make sense, they said. It would hurt quarterly earnings. Shareholders wouldn't like it. David thought about Emily choking on the restaurant floor. He thought about Marcus's hands, steady and precise, saving her life. He thought about 17 people who died because David had made a decision based on a spreadsheet. "Do it anyway," David said. "And if the board won't approve it, I'll fund it myself." The room went silent. They approved the proposal point 6 months later. The cardiac ICU reopened. David attended the ribbon-cutting ceremony. He scanned the small crowd, hoping to see Marcus. But he wasn't there. That evening, David drove back to the bridge. Marcus was gone. No one had seen him in weeks. David never found him. But every year, on the anniversary of the night Marcus saved Emily's life, David donated to homeless shelters across the city. He funded medical outreach programs. He started a scholarship for doctors who wanted to work in underserved communities. IT wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. Emily graduated from high school, then college, then medical school. She became a cardiologist. On her first day of residency, she pinned a small note to her locker. It said, "Remember the invisible ones." She'd never forgotten the homeless man who saved her life. And she never would. Because sometimes the people we overlook are the ones who save us. And sometimes redemption doesn't come with applause or recognition. It comes quietly, in the middle of the night, when no one is watching. It comes from doing the right thing not because it benefits you, but because it's the only thing you can live with. Marcus Gray never got his life back. But he got something else. He got to know that even after everything was taken from him, he still had the one thing that mattered most, the ability to save a life when it counted. And in the end, maybe that was enough. Did this story remind you of something? Drop a comment below. Where are you watching from, and how old are you? Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next story.